1912 in the quiet corners of New Zealand. A child was born who would grow to become one of the most feared names whispered in the corridors of Nazi power. Nancy Grace Augusta Wake entered the world with fire in her veins and restlessness in her heart, qualities that would one day make her the Gestapo's most wanted woman. Growing up in poverty after her family moved to Australia, Nancy refused to accept the limitations life had placed before her. When she inherited £200, a fortune for a girl of her circumstances, she made a decision that would set the course for everything that followed. She left home New York, London, and finally Paris, where Nancy discovered her calling as a journalist. But it was her assignment to Vienna in the 1930s that would forge the steel in her soul. Nancy, now a young woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, watches in horror as Nazi sympathizers assault Jewish civilians. Her face hardens with disgust and rage. What Nancy witnessed in Vienna, the systematic brutalization of innocent people, ignited a hatred for fascism that would burn within her for the rest of her life. She had seen evil with her own eyes, and she would never forget. Nancy, radiant in an evening gown, raises a champagne glass alongside her husband Henry Fiacca, a wealthy French industrialist. The room buzzes with sophisticated conversation. By 1936, Nancy had married Henry Fiacca and settled into the glamorous social circles of Marseilles. She seemed destined for a life of luxury and leisure, but Nancy Wake was never meant for an ordinary life. When Germany invaded France in 1940, the official resistance lasted just 6 weeks. But for Nancy Wake, surrender was not in her vocabulary. "I don't see why we women should just wave our men a proud goodbye and then knit them balaclavas," she declared. While France fell around her, Nancy made a choice that would transform her from a wealthy socialite into one of history's most effective resistance fighters. She joined the underground, operating within the Pat O'Leary Line, an escape network named after its leader Albert Guy Riss. Nancy and Henry used their wealth and connections to shelter Allied soldiers and downed air crews. Their apartment became a safe house, their social circle a cover for deadly serious work, but the Gestapo were watching. Nancy's effectiveness had caught their attention, and soon she earned a nickname that would follow her into legend, the White Mouse, for her uncanny ability to slip through their fingers time and time again. With a 5 million franc bounty on her head, Nancy became the most hunted woman in France, yet she continued her work, growing bolder and more dangerous with each successful mission. Even when captured, Nancy proved unbreakable. For 4 days, the Gestapo interrogated her, trying to crack the woman they knew only as an effective operative. She revealed nothing, not her true identity, not her network, not a single name. Her rescue came in the form of audacious deception. Pat O'Leary himself stormed into the jail, posing as a Vichy militia officer, claiming Nancy as his mistress and demanding her release. The confused German guards, too embarrassed to question further, let the most wanted woman in France walk free. But the net was closing. In 1943, when the Pat O'Leary line was betrayed, Nancy was forced to make the most difficult decision of her life. She fled France, leaving Henry behind. She would never see her husband alive again. Henry would be captured by the Gestapo, tortured for information about his wife's whereabouts. He died without betraying her, a sacrifice Nancy would only learn about after France's liberation. Reaching Britain, Nancy immediately volunteered for the Special Operations Executive, Churchill's secret army of saboteurs and spies. Her trainers noted her exceptional marksmanship, her abundant energy, and her complete lack of fear. They also noted her rebellious streak, particularly after she arrived for one training session thoroughly drunk. She mastered every deadly art they could teach her: explosives, grenades, radio transmission, silent killing. Nancy Wake was transforming from resistance courier to professional agent of war. By April 1944, everyone knew the Allied invasion of France was coming. Nancy's mission was simple in concept, terrifying in execution: parachute into occupied France and help coordinate the resistance to create maximum chaos when the landings began. Nancy Wake was going home to war. "I hope that all the trees in France bear such beautiful fruit this year. Cut out that chat and get me out of this tree." Even suspended in a tree in enemy territory, Nancy Wake had no time for flattery. Maps cover every surface. Nancy briefs a group of hardened resistance fighters, her authority unquestioned despite her gender. Working with local resistance groups, Nancy established supply drops, coordinated sabotage operations, and prepared for the coming storm. She had returned to France not as a refugee, but as a weapon of war. In early June, 7,000 resistance fighters struck simultaneously across the region. Nancy was in the thick of the fighting, leading from the front as German forces responded with overwhelming firepower. Tanks, artillery, aircraft, the Germans brought everything they had to crush the uprising. In the chaos that followed, Nancy's team lost their radio operator and their communications equipment. Without contact with London, they were cut off and alone. What happened next would become the stuff of legend. Finding a bicycle, Nancy Wake set out alone across 500 kilometers of enemy-occupied territory. Her destination, the nearest SOE radio. Her mission, restore communications and save the resistance. For 72 hours, Nancy pedaled through enemy territory. When German patrols approached, she hid. When her strength failed, she found more. 500 kilometers in 3 days. A journey that would have been remarkable for a trained athlete in peacetime. She reached the radio station, transmitted her urgent messages to London, received new codes and coordinates, and then, incredibly, pedaled back. With communications restored, Nancy led increasingly daring operations. Her attack on the local Gestapo headquarters resulted in 38 German dead and the complete destruction of their command center. It was during this raid that Nancy Wake killed a German soldier with her bare hands to prevent him from raising the alarm. The socialite from Marseilles had become one of the war's most lethal operatives. Through the summer of 1944, as Allied forces fought their way across France, Nancy and her resistance fighters waged their own war behind enemy lines. Bridges fell, communications were severed, and German rear operations were thrown into chaos. By September 1944, Nancy's clandestine war was over. France was free, but the cost had been enormous. Her husband was dead, countless friends had been lost, and the woman who had once danced in Marseille's ballrooms had become someone she could barely recognize. The honors came from every Allied nation. France awarded her the Médaille de la Résistance and the Croix de Guerre. Britain gave her the George Medal. America bestowed the Medal of Freedom, yet for Nancy, no medal could bring back those she had lost. In 1957, Nancy remarried an RAF officer and settled in London, trying to build a peaceful life from the ashes of war. Did you ever feel afraid during your time in the field? I was never afraid. I was too busy to be afraid. Nancy Wake died in 2011 at the age of 98. She had outlived the rage that once hunted her, outlived the war that made her famous, and outlived most of the world that remembered why her courage mattered. Today, the fields of France are quiet. The bridges Nancy destroyed have been rebuilt. The communication lines she severed now carry messages of commerce and friendship, but the freedom she helped win endures.